I'm going to introduce to you Dr. Habib.
Hello. It's such a pleasure to be here. So, for every man, 10 women will be diagnosed with some form of autoimmune disease. For every man, 10 women will be diagnosed with some form of autoimmune disease. And, you know, when you look at autoimmune diseases, it could be things such as Hashimoto's thyroiditis, where the body attacks itself, literally. The body starts producing antibodies, and it actually starts chewing up and eating up the thyroid tissue. Or it could be vitiligo, where the body produces antibody against the pigment on the skin. Or it could be alopecia areata, where the body produces antibody against itself and it creates hair loss. Or it could be some form of autoimmune hepatitis, where the body produces antibody and attacks itself, liver cells. Or it could be a neurological, devastating disease such as multiple sclerosis, where the body produces antibody against the very myelin sheath around the nerves. The research that it actually shows some type of infertility, it's caused because of autoimmunity, as well as some forms of cancer. So as a family doctor, I've been working with this issue of, well, why is that? Why is there such a gender predilection of 10 women for every man? And this thing has been going on for decades. And no one is really looking at it. Why is that? I wish I could tell you that, you know, I had a midnight dream that, you know, that the solution came to me, or or we got this double-blinded, placebo-controlled study that brought the answer. That wasn't really what occurred. What occurred was observing my little girl. She was at the time 3.5, and she had a little bit of eczema on her forearms. And at that age, there were some peculiarities that I started noticing. Like she wanted to wear long sleeve, and she would not be wanting to play with other girls. You see, at the age of 3.5, she was beginning to have this internal world that she felt that she was less than. I mean, it was devastating. So in this whole process, my beloved and I, who actually is the brain in our family, she's a pediatric dentist and orthodontist, Dr. Sherry Sammy, you know, we sat down and we had a curb consult and we came up with a solution. And the solution was to come up with some of these long socks that Hannah, our daughter, loved. And we would cut out the, you know, both ends, and we would turn them into sleeves. Well, it worked. She was so excited. You know, she got back out there, and she got her oomph back. She was excited about playing with other little girls. And at that point, I started working with my colleague, Dr. Robert Gross, who was actually Harvard-trained MD and a PhD from Tufts. And we said, well, what if this could be the cause? What if this could be the contributing factor of all this autoimmune diseases? So we started putting a group together and focusing on just gamut of autoimmune diseases, and we started seeing patients. And as they would come in, we would really get longer histories. We would pay attention to their biographies of what was it like to be them. And instead of putting them on all these strong chemotherapeutic agents and pharmaceutical medications and high dosage of steroids, and that's really is currently what's available, we started prescribing them different remedies. And that's what I'm here to share with you about. The acronym for the remedies that we recommended is It's Allowed. You see, the I stands for imperfections. It's really incredible. I mean, I've been privileged enough to work with some of the most powerful, talented, gifted women in the world. And when you really sit down and you talk to them, a lot of them, they find these tiniest of imperfections, and they start attacking themselves. And the context and the narrative that they work out of it's attacking themselves. You see, when you look at Native American culture, they have this beautiful mythology story, that when they do their weavings, they always leave an intentional imperfection in there. Because they actually believe that's where the spirit comes in and goes out. It's almost like a window to the other side. That was profound. See, if we could really implement that, if we could create a different context, would it really work? And how are we gonna monitor these? So we came up with markers, with physiological markers that we could measure with every patient. When they would come in, we would draw their blood, we would look at these markers, and then as we walked them through that remedy, the acronym, then every quarter, every 12 weeks, we would look at their blood work. It was astounding. The results are unbelievable. They're so profound that we're actually writing a second book about it. You see, the I stands for really holding the imperfections as a way of going deeper, as a way of creating an internal world. So many of us, we actually believe that this is all we see. This idea that there is a different world inside, it's so foreign. So we started prescribing various different things: meditations, closing your eyes, dream incubations, where you really just 5 to 12 minutes every night, you reflect over your entire day. It's allowed. Where the T stands for the level of tension that it's developed within oneself. You see, all of us, we have this tension that it just from the time that we wake up, it develops within us, but we look at it as a bad thing. We don't really know how to move it around and allow it to sublimate into what we refer to as tensegrity, where tensegrity is a level of tension that creates a deeper integrity within us. It's allowed. The S was the funnest of all. The S stands for sensuality and sexuality. We started asking questions, and we started finding out that some of these women with autoimmune diseases, they hadn't been sexually active for decades. And the last thing that they wanted to hear was for another doctor to tell them, gosh, you're juggling your profession and the kids, and you're tired, sex is important. They didn't want to hear that. So instead, we would bring in and we would show them research from reputable organizations such as National Institute of Health. What they looked at was, it's just astounding. Think about it. They looked at a cohort of women with breast cancer, and they saw that the lowest number of sexual activity and orgasm the highest rate of breast cancer. You don't hear about that. We actually published that. If you look up under my name, it's called elusive orgasm. Two of the most powerful hormones in human body, oxytocin, relaxin. These women with the physiological terrain of autoimmunity, they had the lowest hormones of oxytocins and relaxin. It's allowed. Can you imagine walking out with that prescription in your hand? See, in order to have that conversation, it requires a different narratives. It requires a heart-centeredness. You got to be invested this other human being. It is so easy to write down, for steroids. And then they would get it in the pharmacy, they would take it. But it would have, you've got to create a different context to connect, to find out, but why is it that they haven't been intimate for over a decade? What is occurring for them? What is the context of the relationship? What are the blocks? What are the misunderstandings? What are the misinterpretations? What is it that they keep bumping into that it's taking that away? And that was the type of conversation that most people weren't being asked. It's allowed. Where the A stood for acceptance. Acceptance. I mean, you hear it all the time. But what is it that you're accepting? You see, it's so easy. You can come a little early and they cover up all the moles and the receding hairlines. I would look prettier. But what was it like if you accept yourself? What is it like to come from a place that you really are comfortable with yourself? That was the type of conversation that we were having. Can you imagine? Some of these women, they wanted to be size 2 because they thought that that was beautiful. Can you imagine? If you're born a pine and you want to be an oak, I mean, wow, you're continuously, you're in a battle with yourself. You see, based on what we created that gave birth to this model of it's allowed, we actually believe that consciousness precedes a phenotypic expression, meaning your consistent thought processes, they give birth to a shift in the body physiologically to create a phenotypic shift, to produce the antibody. You can't, to produce an antibody, do you know the amount of energy that goes into that? You're producing a protein. You want to create the iPad or iPod or the next cell phone. How much time does it go into it to produce a sophisticated protein that shifts and changes? It requires a level of consciousness, and that's the terrain that no one was talking about. Acceptance. Just really see that. See walking out with a prescription that tells you acceptance, and it gives you specific advanced spiritual practices that you could do on a daily basis that really cultivates, that it forms inside your consciousness what it is to be more accepting. It's allowed. Where the L stood for, you name it, loving, the love factor. Look, if I wear the button that says love, you know that's really important to me. And to be very frank with you, it's probably one of the most important things to me because it saved my life. But it's a specific form of loving. We're not talking about going to Tahiti for 10 days. I don't have anything against going to Tahiti for 10 days. But it's a gentler way. You see, it's a way that your subconscious really feels that. It's being gentle with oneself. You know, it's a deeper gentility. Can you see that? Can you see walking out with a prescription from your doctor that says self-love? Can you imagine that? Can you see what that would do to really have that prescription and to be practical and to cultivate it? It's allowed. The second L was about letting go. Letting go. Letting go as a spiritual practice. Letting go. And we would tell them, we would say, look, it could be about you wanting certain things to be perfect. The minute that you become aware of it, just see if you could practice letting go. Practice taking some deep breaths. And they would. And then we would monitor their blood work. Astounding. Astounding. Simple things. Are you following where we're going? Where we're going is people would come in with a devastating physiological terrain, and you would follow their body and you would look at physiological markers and you would see a shift. Yeah, it's allowed. You see, the O was the greatest. We would tell them to get out, to go outside of their mind. I mean, unbelievable to sit across from a 16-year-old that kept cutting herself because she felt like she wasn't good enough, she wasn't pretty enough, she wasn't thin enough, she wasn't thick enough, she was this, she was that, her second toe was longer. To create a context where they would go out, to create a conversation that they would understand what a miracle they are. Do you realize that every second, over 40 million tons, every second, over 40 million tons of the sun burns itself up. So there is light in the sky. So you and I could have this conversation. And then you would create this context of, do you understand what's occurring? That we got this little ball, and then there's this ball of fire. The ball of fire is 1,000,000 times larger than Earth. The sun is. And we keep rotating around ourselves and around the sun. Ladies and gentlemen, our language is flawed. When the ball of fire comes up, we still refer to it as sunrise. Isn't that funny? Oh, I'm gonna go and watch the sunset. The sun is not setting. We're moving. Can you see that? You know, to get people out, 33 minutes, once or twice per week, it would shift everything for them. I mean, I love it when I would tell people, do you realize that the very molecule back of your eyes, retinol, it's half of beta carotene that you see in carrot, right? That's why they say carrot is good for you, for your eyesight. You look at the molecule of beta carotene, it's literally 1/2 of the retinol, which is back of our eyes. It's a freaking mystery. Isn't that amazing? So when you create this context, they would get excited. They would realize what a miracle they are, that they're part of this cosmic conversation, this ontological experience called life. It's allowed. I wish I could tell you. Look, it's so easy to write down methotrexate and to write that prescription. And don't get me wrong, I have a prescription pad, and when it's needed, I'm a great advocate of it. But it's a different conversation to pay attention to the consciousness that precedes a physiological disturbance. It's allowed. Where the W is probably one of my favorite. The W is for wholeness. It stands for the we. I remember when I was in medical school, one of my anatomy partners told me that, you know what, when I went to college, my grandmother got every piece of clothing that I had worn since I was born and quilted a blanket for me. I started weeping. Can you see that? Can you see that at one point there was a remedy where, just like now, just like what Michelle is taking a stand for, that would bring women together. They would quilt together. In the process, they would talk, they would process their hurt feelings and their disturbances. It was as if they were digesting what was occurring, whether they were knitting or quilting. And they would bring fragmented pieces. They would create a blanket that would bring so much warmth for the whole family. We've lost that. And that's why we're here. That's why you're here. You're the gateway for a different possibility, and it's allowed. The E was for enjoyment factor. We would really talk to them. We would give them questionnaire of, what do you enjoy? Some of them enjoyed dancing, and the last time that they had gone dancing was years. Hiking, walking, biking, walking the dog, getting a pet. It was amazing what it did for them, their body. It's allowed. The D was the divinity. Last but not least, where we would really encourage them and we would invite them to find a place, something that they could connect with, while we look not at the things that are seen, but at the things that are unseen. For the things that are seen are temporal, and the things that are unseen are eternal. This suit, this watch, the screen, they're temporal. So we would introduce them to these new qualities that you can't see, such as integrity. We would define what integrity is. For us, based on that, it would be a page and a half. What it means to have wholeness within what you say. We would define what it is to be authentic, to be honest, to be truthful. Qualities that no one can get at Whole Foods or Trader Joe's. Can't get it. You can't read it in any book. I don't care if the book is on Oprah. You can't go to a seminar and just get a whole ton of authenticity. It won't do you good. It needs to be cultivated. It's allowed. So what I'm sharing with you is, women came in and they were dealing with some of the most horrific physiological experiences. And one of the most important things that we did was we created a context for them. And at the end of it, they got filled up. I remember when I was a chemistry professor, one of my favorite experiments was to stand in front of students. And I would get two tongues, hold two paper cups. And we had two Bunsen burners. And I would hold these two cups. One of the cups was filled up with water. And one of them was just empty. I would hold it right over these two flames. The empty cup, it would catch on fire and it would just poof, be gone. The cup that was filled up with water, to the extent that I would keep filling it up, it would never burn up. It would never burn up. You see, I'm here to invite all of us, men or women, with autoimmune disease, without autoimmune disease, to come together and to find out, what is it? How could we fill ourselves up? How could we cultivate a deeper level of self-honoring? When we get filled up, then we can take a stand for others, and it would be a different experience. So, on the verge of this upcoming Mother's Day, it was my privilege to be here. And as I bow to you, my invitation for you is, as you walk out, really reflect. Reflect how, why, what will it take for you to fill yourselves up and to move forward in your lives from that place of fullness, because it's allowed. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Habib.